There's somebody really cool who does super intelligent, philosophical Christian stuff on the internet. And a while back, I reached out to them and was like, hey, we should do a thing together. I really respect the way you think. It'd be fun. And they didn't get back to me, but their guy got back to me. It was like, yeah, sure. Can you just answer these questions? And I was like, yeah, you bet I can. And then my family and I, we got out the door or something for some travel. And I just totally forgot for a really long time until like today. And then I remembered that months ago I had made that contact and I never got back to them. Whoops. Well, that's embarrassing. Now I got to go and fire off an email to somebody who's really fancy and important and good at things and be like, hey, I'm an idiot. You still want to hang out or whatever? You've had that happen, right? Please tell me you've had that happen. I guess maybe some of you are just way more on top of it than me. But sometimes, like we were talking about yesterday, stuff goes over the waterfall for me. Most of it I catch, but every now and then I just have this enormous gaffe, like the one that I just described, that is absolutely real, by the way. It's not like some kind of thing that I'm making up for podcast theater here. That is actually a real deal. I got to go sort that out. And it's a gross, sickening feeling when you realize that you just totally whiffed on something that needed your attention. But, you know, it happens. And what else can you do when you figure that out other than go and try to make the thing right, which is what I'm going to have to do next. Well, we got a situation like that unfolding here in Esther chapter 6. It's pretty mundane to have a clerical personal life oversight kind of thing like what I'm describing. It doesn't seem like the kind of thing that noticing that and getting it worked out would have huge fateful implications for the history of your life or the history of other people's lives or the history of ever. But in Esther chapter 6, we're getting a situation where just that exact sort of deal does have gigantic implications. 2 days ago, or whenever we were talking about it, I went through and made up this whole scene in my brain. That was kind of my attempt at expressing to you how I visualize this little moment in the story between Esther 5 and Esther 6 as the table is set on the eve of battle. And you would expect that some gigantic, dramatic, eventful thing is going to happen to reset the situation and bring about resolution to this big crisis where Mordecai is going to get impaled and hung before Esther can do anything about it. But it isn't that. It's just a little personal, administrative, forgot to do a thing, clerical oversight that ends up setting things in motion toward resolution. Here's how it goes. Esther 6:1. That night the king could not sleep, so he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. Now, at this point, it's probably 474 BC, which means we are 12 years in to a very dramatic reign, and there are tons of things that have happened over the course of that reign that would fill multiple books. So just the fact that some chronicler comes in and starts reading some chronicle doesn't really mean anything. I mean, there are probably hundreds of volumes that you could grab and read from that wouldn't in any way reference back to the situation that is about to be referenced here. And that would be fine. That'd be interesting and all. But there's one particular event, one particular thing that has slipped the king's mind that in the grand scheme of things, he not only really needs to remember, but he needs to remember it like exactly this night within the next hour or two, or Mordecai the Jew is going to get impaled and hung up for everybody to see. Verse 2. It was found recorded there in the Chronicles that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. And I don't think it's that hard to picture the scene here. Xerxes is sitting in his favorite sitting chair, staring out off the balcony. Maybe he's in some kind of relaxed, cushiony position. Maybe he's got some grapes, something to munch on, whatever Persian king midnight snack would be. And stuff's getting read and getting read and getting read. And the king's like, yeah, yeah, okay, I remember that, whatever. Okay, but none of it is really ringing a bell or matters to him or is scratching whatever this nagging itch is that is keeping him up in the first place. And the chronicler probably has a pretty boring voice, and he's just rolling through it. And then he's like, Mordecai the Jew thwarted an assassination plot. And then at court that day, a double shipment of grain was authorized to the eastern reaches of the Bactrian satrap. Wait, hold on a second. You can imagine the king saying, Go back one. What was the thing about the assassination? And there's so many of those that I have trouble keeping straight. Which one was this again? This was the one, Your Highness, with the guy who sits at the gate, the Jewish dude who he overheard a couple of the other guys. This is the Bigthana and Teresh. You had them impaled, you'll recall. But yeah, it turned out there was merit to the accusation. They really did have some sort of plan cooking. And maybe the chronicler's like, no, I do remember the details on this one. This is the deal where Mordecai, somehow he had a friend in common with your queen, Esther, who you just had the banquet with. And she's the one who alerted you to it and pointed you back to Mordecai to make sure that he got credit. And Xerxes is like, that's right. And he asks the logical follow-up question that anybody asks when they've made a clerical oversight and there was something you really ought to have done, but you just didn't do it. And he asks, well, what honor and recognition did Mordecai receive for this? And the chronicler flips a couple pages and licks his finger a couple times. Nothing has been done for him. And I can't quite tell if in this moment King Xerxes was like, oh, yes, okay, that was it. I knew something was off. Okay, yeah, well, obviously we got to get that straightened out. Or if Xerxes was still flummoxed and vexed, I was like, all right, well, that isn't what I went looking for, but I'm glad we caught it. That's embarrassing. But whatever Xerxes' attitude is here, the action plan has got to be the same. I mean, you're the king of kings. You can't leave debts outstanding. You can't go around owing people favors. You have to pay that stuff off like a Lannister. And so he is going to have to come up with some sort of elaborate thing that's probably even bigger than it would have been in the first place had he remembered to honor this person who saved his life sooner, to really save face and make it clear to everybody that, hey, you're really incentivized to be loyal and faithful to the king and to let us know if there are any problems we should be aware of. What exactly is that generous gift from the throne for Mordecai going to be? Well, he hasn't had time to think about that yet. He's just glad that he got that sorted out. Now, Herodotus gives us a whole bunch of examples of Xerxes himself, but also Darius, his father, his predecessor, having debts that were outstanding to someone else and being eager to fulfill those things. There is one right here in Herodotus's description of the Battle of Salamis, the one where the Athenians, the Greek navy, defeated Xerxes' navy while Xerxes was sitting there watching. This is no doubt an image Xerxes never, ever forgot. But in the midst of this, Herodotus tells us that there were a couple of people who were brave on the Persian side with their ships, and that Xerxes remembered that. Okay, here it is. Of them, however, a few were purposely slack in the fight according to the injunctions of Themistocles, that's the Athenian admiral, but the greater number were not so. I might mention now the names of many captains of ships who destroyed ships of the Hellenes, that's the Greeks, but I will mention only Theomester, the son of Andromatus, and Phylacos, the son of Histasias of Samos. Samos is a little island just off the coast of Izmir, Turkey, Ephesus, a little south and west of Ephesus. For this reason, I make mention of these, because Theomestor, on account of this deed, became the despot of Samos, appointed by the Persians, and Phylacos was recorded as a benefactor of the king and received much land as a reward. And we get another example of this on Xerxes' return trip after being defeated at the Battle of Salamis. While he's working his way back home, there's some barbarian horde who causes him problems, and some brave man from Halicarnassus, a man named Xynagoras, steps in and does like this amazing bear Russian wrestling move on one of these guys and saves some of Xerxes' kin, I believe. And as a result, Xerxes owes him a debt. And it says that he paid off that debt by making this tough guy who went and fought on his behalf, the ruler of a city or a region or something like that. And then, of course, another example that we talked about a while back is the issue with the incident with Silason, the guy who had the cloak when Xerxes' dad, Darius, was a nobody. Darius saw it, was like, I'd like to buy that cloak from you in Egypt. And the guy was like, I just sense that you really, really need it. Here's the cloak. And then years later, when Darius is now king, this guy shows back up and is like, I'm the guy who gave you the cloak. And Darius is like, well, we can't have outstanding debts. And interestingly enough, it's again that island of Samos that this guy is awarded for having given that cloak back in the day to Darius when Darius was a nobody. My point in telling you all of this is that we've got good extra biblical data to say that debts were not left outstanding by these Achaemenid kings. They didn't want to work that way. They wanted to reward loyalty, bravery, faithfulness, service, generosity to the king, and they wanted to do so in a way that was lavish. It's just smart. It's good policy on their part. And the idea that one of these debts got left unpaid would be pretty shocking to Xerxes. What am I doing? Oh, okay, we got to take care of that right away. But there's a timing issue here as well, because in that moment, as Xerxes realizes the clerical oversight mistake that he's made, and while it's fresh on his mind that he needs to do something to straighten that out, he hears a noise out in the courtyard that distracts him. And he wonders, well, who's this coming into the court? And who it is who happens to be walking into the court at that moment is where we get the providential payoff from Xerxes' long sleepless night with the Chronicles. And we will look at that payoff tomorrow. All right, I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.